So, where have I been? It's been months since I've uploaded on this channel, and let's just say it has been a very rough few months. Not just because of COVID, because of what I've been going through. The last time I vlogged, I was in the hospital and have been in the hospital on and off now for a number of months. I have a lot to update everyone on this channel. So let's get into it. So, where do I start? I am now facing the possible diagnosis of classical EDS at 35 years old. Which to me seems strange because I've done research and I've talked to many people who suffer from EDS, and and a lot of the times they get diagnosed at a very young age. But from what I've been told by the number of doctors that I'm currently under, or the under care of, it sounded weird too. Anyways, they told me that EDS is a very strange condition. It can sometimes, depending on the different types of mutations and what type of mutations, it can often show at a very young age or later on in life. And with me, given my history, looking way back, I had multiple red flags from when I was a child. Chronic leg pain that were often dismissed as growing pains, from having extremely flat, soft feet. I do not callus on my feet, and I often am very prone to friction burns and blood blisters and water blisters on my feet. I have to be very careful with the type of shoes I wear because I react to a lot of different shoes. Like I am very prone to friction burns, basically, and that's always been a problem throughout my entire life, and that sucks. Not being able to wear shoes that are like pretty and ones that you want to be able to wear and you can't wear. So that is one thing. Another thing, excuse me, is the constant GI problems that I've had throughout my entire life, and all the way up to when I first started going into puberty and in my 20s being diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis. But having all the red flags at 11 years old for endometriosis, with the constant pain and the extreme heavy bleeding, and the fatigue and the stomach upsets and the problems going to the bathroom and all that stuff I often faced as a child. Not only that, my hips were always weird. I would always feel like my hips were coming out of joint or locking, or in very weird situations of just getting up off the couch or getting out of the car or sometimes walking. I would often feel these things happening. So that's another red flag. And then going into my teens and having a number of weird symptoms in my teens, from developing seasonal asthma and allergies and skin lesions and irritations. I broke out in a massive rash on my forearms and my chest, and it was there for a number of weeks. I think I had it for like 6 weeks, and we tried multiple creams and multiple medications, and nothing really worked except for some type of steroid that they had me on. But I mean, they tested me for everything when that rash came out, from scabies to insect bites to poison ivy, poison oak, to just contact dermatitis, and you know, tons of weird tests I had done for that rash, and nothing really came back except for having the presence of neutrophils and some other white blood cells in these little tiny lesions. So they came up later on when I was 20 with the possible diagnosis of lupus. That was thrown around. So let's rewind a little bit before we get into the autoimmune stuff. So that was when I was about 17 when I had that rash form. It eventually cleared up. Then I fell ill shortly after, to the point where I was bedbound and could not move. I was literally extremely fatigued. My muscles almost didn't work. I felt not paralyzed, but I felt like I was stuck in a body that couldn't move, which was a very weird feeling. It was like I was aware of everything but couldn't physically move, even though I tried. But I was so fatigued. I remember feeling congested and just feverish and ill, and I'd had these fevers all the time and just these chills, and often and a few times went to the doctor, and the doctor basically didn't know what was going on and ran some tests, and my white count was extremely low, and that was really all that came back. There wasn't a whole lot of answers there, but eventually I turned 18, and I was basically unable to keep my head up during my 18th birthday. I remember being around my family and being so weak, and I couldn't even laugh or blow out the candles or enjoy my 18th birthday. So I'll never forget that. That was a very scary moment for me, and it took me about 3 months to recover. I eventually regained my strength back and was able to finish my last year of high school on time. I don't know how I did it, but I did. I graduated. It was scary, and to this day my family will never forget that. I think it scared a lot of people, and that unfortunately was the beginning of a lot of my health issues. So going into my 20s, I had a couple years where I seemed okay, but I still had a lot of chronic pain, a lot of fatigue, and my periods were never normal. They were extremely painful. I would constantly miss days of work in college. I was in college at the time, so I would miss days because I could not move, because the pain was just so bad, and the bleeding. But I still managed to get through college, and you know, I graduated and I managed to move to Toronto and, you know, start a life. At the time I moved in with my boyfriend, my first major boyfriend. I was 20 years old, and I was starting to build a life and doing all of this while fighting whatever was going on in my body at the time, because I still did not have a diagnosis yet. I had a lot of terms thrown at me, from endometriosis to lupus to adult Still's disease to rheumatoid arthritis, to MS at one point. There were so many different medical terms thrown at me, but no answer as to what was going on. But I still carried on and carried on my life the best I could. So, my 22nd year, I had moved out of the relationship that I was in at the time and moved out on my own. And at this point, I was starting to show more and more symptoms, and I kept trying to reach out to doctors that just didn't really know what to say or what to do or how to go about finding what was the diagnosis. They put me through a number of tests, and no real answer. The only pattern that was constantly showing in my blood work were my white counts. They were always dropping. They never seemed to want to stabilize. In particular, a lot of the time it would be my neutrophils that never really wanted to stay afloat. So that was a constant red flag, as well as my ESR levels were constantly elevated. So that was all red flags that were pointing doctors towards possible autoimmune conditions or a connective tissue disorder of some sort. At this point, I wasn't getting very many skin lesions, but I was getting more mouth lesions and TMI hair. Basically, I was having a lot of mouth ulcers, ulceration of my genital area and my rectum around my anus, and they tested me for multiple viruses, bacterial infections, contact dermatitis, allergies, all that kind of stuff. Everything came back negative. I didn't have any weird virus that was causing it. I didn't have any contact dermatitis or allergies that were causing these ulcerations to happen. But one term in particular was starting to become thrown around at me, and that was Behçet's disease. So at 23, I had started seeing another guy, and we were seeing each other, and he was going into medicine, and he had mentioned to me that he had lupus and that maybe I should be referred to a rheumatologist that could be looking more into connective tissue diseases, that maybe they could push me towards some sort of answer, because at the time I was seeing a lot of allergy specialists and pulmonologists because I was having a lot of problems with my breathing. And I was also seeing like general practitioners, and I was starting to see GI doctors as well, because my GI symptoms were also an issue at this time and starting to get much worse. At this time, I was told that I had IBS, and that they wanted to do a scope to make sure that I didn't have Crohn's or colitis, because of the symptoms I was experiencing then, which was abdominal pain and lots of bloating and food sensitivities, as well as, at the time, fast bowels. So I was going to the bathroom multiple times a day at that time in my life. So I was about, I would say between 23 and 25 is when my bowels were moving too much. So they did a scope and they found that I had what was called lymphocytic colitis in my large colon. In particular, it was in the ascending colon, I believe, where they found the majority of it. It was also in other places too, but the majority of it was in the ascending colon. So they put me on 2 medications at that time, and my GI symptoms seemed to get a little bit better, but I was still dealing with the bloating, the pain, but the bowel movements had gotten a little bit better. Also, at this time, they sent me to a rheumatologist to talk about what specific connective tissue could be causing the ulcers and the GI symptoms, because even though it was lymphocytic colitis that was found, they still thought, because it was lymphocytic, which is more microscopic than your normal colitis, it seemed like it would most likely be some sort of connective tissue disease that was causing the lymphocytic colitis. So I did see a rheumatologist then, which did not go so well. The rheumatologist that I saw was not a very nice doctor. His bedside manner was very awful, and he really didn't talk to me, or really didn't help me in any way. If anything, he basically said that I was crazy and that most likely my symptoms were all in my head, and that he thought that my blood work looked beautiful and I didn't have any problems whatsoever. So he basically brushed me aside after that, because I was so devastated and very mortified by this doctor, because I did not match all of the symptoms or all of the criteria of Behçet's disease. So I just remember leaving that office that day and crying and feeling extremely lost. I did not believe what had just happened. So I went home that night and I did a ton of research on other doctors, other rheumatologists that could give me an answer. I began to look into bedside manner and reviews on each doctor, because I just did not want to go in to another appointment and have the exact same experience that I had just had with that doctor repeat itself with another. So I finally got a consultation with another rheumatologist. That rheumatologist was not at all like the first one. He was very, very, very nice and listened to me, and I had a lot of questions, and the first thing he said was, most likely this is Behçet's. And he was very shocked to hear that the doctor before him had said all of the things that he did say and did not put me through any testing at all for Behçet's disease. So I ended up having a bunch of blood work done, a bunch of imaging done, ultrasounds on all my joints, and they did determine that I had fit the criteria for Behçet's disease, and that most likely the lymphocytic colitis and the skin lesions that I was experiencing before this were all in line with Behçet's disease. as well as the ulceration of my mouth and my genital area and my rectal area. They were all big indicators of Behçet's disease. Around this time, they started me on a drug called Plaquenil, which is also known as hydroxychloroquine, which is the drug that you're hearing quite a bit of on the news with COVID and all. It is also an anti-malarial drug, but they give it to patients with rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and a number of other autoimmune and connective tissue diseases. It's a very effective drug, but it has a lot of side effects, unfortunately. It's not an easy drug to take. So I started taking that. That was my first round of treatments. And at this time, I started going into a massive flare. My eyes started showing signs of vasculitis. I had a lot of vasculitis in my eyes. My eyes were bloodshot red for a few weeks. They started me on steroids for my eyes. And that eventually cleared up. I had started collecting fluid around my joints, in particular my knees and my elbows. So they had decided to start me on a course of prednisone. Now, when they started me on prednisone, I think they had only started me on 45 milligrams at first, which wasn't a super high dose, but it was high enough that it would help control my flare on top of the Plaquenil. So those two drugs I was started on. At the time I went back to college, so I was on all of these meds while going to school. I was doing my pre-med for nursing. So I was about 24 when this was happening. By then, I was on prednisone for quite a while because I just could not get off of it. My body had a really hard time weaning off of it. For anybody who knows about being on prednisone, it is not an easy drug to get off of. Once your body goes into an adrenal crisis, your body needs it because your adrenal glands are no longer working. So during that time, I had gained almost 100 pounds in water weight alone. It was devastating to me. I will be inserting some photos of how swollen my face was. It was very traumatic being. Hey guys, it's future me here. Sorry, jiggly camera here, but I'm just editing this video and I'm just realizing that it's gonna be a really long video if I keep it going the way it is. So I think I'm going to cut it here and make this a two-parter. Yeah, we're gonna end it here. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next 2 weeks.